needs investment, be it from domestic investment as well as foreign direct investment. So the thrust of this budget is again to continue to attract investments and in order to stimulate a growth and to diversify our economy. And we are focusing also on the digital economy, and that's why our digital agenda is important, and the measures are related most with the digital agenda towards achieving is to provide jobs and to enhance the income, and also to provide opportunity to increase income of our people. Okay, so the focus is more towards generating the business income, and as I will explain later, the highlights here is main measures is the program of hashtag Malaysia Kerja or Jobs Malaysia, and this is to ensure the income in Malaysia can be enhanced and to create more value-added economic activities. And the third thrust, of course, we have to again continue to reduce the imbalance development among the regions in Malaysia. So within this thrust, the focus is to provide more allocation for rural development and to enhance social protection, as well as to develop the Bumi Putra, and there are also specific measures to address or to empower women, and as well as to address the unfortunate group such as the disabled. And the fourth thrust, this is to continue to strengthen our fiscal position, because in order to for the government to play its the role of government, we still need to have a sustainable resources. That's why we still need to consolidate. So for this year, our fiscal deficit target is 3.4% to GDP as compared to GDP, and for next year we are targeting at 3.2%. And why we coin it as preemptively expansionary? Because if in economy, if you say expansionary, you are trying to address some issue, basically to address a recession. But now we are not in recession. So but because of we expect the lag impact of the trade war, so we are growth to 1.1%, and for 2020 they're also revising it downwards to 3.2%. And on top of that, the World Trade Organization, WTO, also has revised downward the global trade forecast in early October, from 2.6%, if I'm not mistaken, to 1.2%, quite in line with the IMF projection. So on this basis, that's why we have to take preemptive measures in order to continue to sustain our economic growth and to be still resilient to the any external shocks. Okay. So I would like to highlight this is the commodity price assumption that we use to project our economic growth this year and next year. So for Brent crude oil, we are using a level of 62 US dollar per barrel, and palm oil it is around 2,100. back to the good. And for rubber, it's about it. We are expecting 0.1% this year. This is one of the main reason is because we are still floated, and only the targeted groups will be enjoying the subsidies. So one of the reason why we are projecting a higher inflation rate for next year at about 2%. So in relation to the trade, so we are expecting a lower current account balance, but still in a positive territory of about 1.9% to the gross national income. Okay, next, this again the breakdown of the component of our economic GDP forecast. So we are expecting 4.7% this year after registering 4.8% average for the first half of this year. So we expect the momentum for the second half is still continue. So we are expecting about 4.7%. And for next year, it is projected the Malaysian economy to grow at 4.8%. And if we break the breakdown of the demand side, so again the private consumption and private investment continue to drive our economic growth. And of course, as you see, our public investment, this is because of since the new administration, some of the mega projects have been reviewed, renegotiated, and also public investment here also covers the investment of the public corporation, like the big ones like in oil ONG business like Petronas and other big companies, government companies. So we're expecting they're reducing their capex for this year and next year because of their main projects upon almost completion. For example, the Rapid Pengerang, and some other big project by the government companies. Yeah. So and then so for this year we are our net exports. For this year we are expecting a negative growth for export and import, but for next year we are estimating about 1.4% growth in export and import about 1.9%. And in terms of supply side, services continue to be the biggest contributor to the our economic growth. So it's also expected to be the biggest contributor also to the rate of growth of our GDP next year. And this time around, we're expecting construction at a lower pace. This is also in relation with the public investment drop because of the most of the government projects are in near completion, and some of them are already completed. Okay, this is a overview of the our economic pie. So, as I said before, services for the supply side, services continue to be the biggest portion of the economic cake, so to speak. And also on the demand side, the private sector continue to be the biggest contributor. And our current GDP value in real term is about 1.5 trillion we're expecting for 2020, and in nominal term it's about 1.6 trillion. So if I say the deficit of 3.2% of GDP next year, and with that 3%, the absolute number for a deficit is about 50 to 51 billion projected for next year. Okay, so let me just briefly explain our financial position. Although we are having a current account fiscal deficit, overall balance of fiscal deficit, but still our current account balance still in positive territory, where our revenue is still sufficient to cover our OPEX, operating expenditure. And if you look at the OPEX figures from 2019 to 2020, it is a quite big drop. This is just because of in 2019 our OE allocation has included the transfers to the tax refund. As if you can still remember, we are owing the companies and individual or businesses of tax refund, quite a big outstanding amount of tax refund to from the GST and also the income tax. So we are allocating about 37 billion for this year, and so far nearly 16 billion has been paid to the companies for the tax refund, both for GST as well as the income tax. So if and also for the development expenditure, this is where I can say it's still expansionary. Our development expenditure, we are allocating 56 billion for next year compared to 54 billion this year. So, and for total expenditure, if we exclude the transfer to the tax refund, this amount, the total growth, there's still a significant growth of the total expenditure from 279 billion to 297 billion. And another thing that I would like to highlight is even though we are getting to partly finance the tax refund, we are getting a Petronas special dividend of one-off of 30 billion this year. But still the difference of 7 billion still has to be financed through the normal revenue of income tax and non-tax revenue. Okay, next. Okay, this is another depiction of our revenue and spending in a graphic form. So again, from where we get our money is again the biggest chunk is income tax, where income tax or tax revenue together with indirect tax is about nearly 70% of our total revenue. So, and where the money is going to be spent on, again, we are spending on productive sector. So by sector, for the economic sector and education sector, continue to receive the biggest chunk of our development expenditure. And this is also in relation to our focus to enhance our human capital through education, and also to enhance our economic agenda. And in terms of OPEX, of course, the federal government emolument or salary and wages still continue to be the biggest chunk. And the next is our debt service charges or interest payment of federal government. So of course, the amount of emolument has to be paid from the OPEX is becoming bigger and bigger. So that's why our public service department are having this policy of we're trying to scale down our civil service. And now the current size of civil service is about nearly 1.7 million. So we are trying to reduce the size in the coming years. Okay. This is the share, the same thing, but in terms of share. So I think it explains the same thing. I think I can skip this chart. We will share this slide with the secretary, and you can refer to this chart later. Okay, this is to show the component of operating expenditure. So out of the total operating expenditure for 2020, out of this 241 billion, the charge expenditure means the expenditure that we have to pay first. It is either by constitution or by act. Then this portion is a mandatory. You have to. It's not discretionary. Yeah? So the rest are so-called we can stay control, but this part is really given that we need to spend. So again, the total spending exclude tax refund is the increase is about 18%. Sorry, it's 18 billion, and the growth is about 6%. So that's why we are saying that we are still in expansionary mode. Yeah? Okay, so this is the famous amount of 1 trillion. So within this new administration, to be more transparent, we are publishing this number regularly. So the latest number, the number you can see there's some increment here from 1.1 to 1.09 to 1.17 because of we still need to finance our commitment of mega project like MRT. So under this committed guarantee, you can see the increase is mainly due to our government company has to borrow more, especially to finance the MRT project. Yeah? So this is committed guarantee, and of course, 1MDB is still there. It's hard to be removed, but the government is trying their best to get back whatever money that has been floating around in the world. So far, I've been informed that we managed to get back about 1 billion from the money related to 1MDB. Okay, next. Okay, now I'm going to the next part of my presentation. We'll be explaining all the components of all the strategies under each trust. Yeah? Okay, for the first trust, as I said before, this is focusing on to drive our economic growth, and the main focus this next year is to be focusing on digital economy. So under this, of course, we will continue to promote our country as a preferred investment destination, and we are also some measures to accelerate digital economy. And again, we are creating opening up more access to financing, especially for SME. As you know, SME contribute about 90% of our economy. Yeah? And again, we need to find new source of growth, so we need to diversify our economy. So there are some measures that try to create new source of economic growth. Okay, so under this first trust, the first strategy is to make Malaysia the preferred investment destination. So basically, these measures, these main measures, are to attract or to facilitate the investment. So, for example, we have established our National Committee on Investment, where this committee will, to centralize the decision making to approve investment application. So, and with this form. With the formation of this committee, it will be expected that we will have a more effective tax incentive for the companies to invest more. Okay, so and we also we'll be reviewing the Promotion Investment Act in order to plug any loopholes with the intention to improve the effectiveness of the tax incentive. And of course, we are focusing on E&E incentives, and again, we are trying to improve the ease of doing business. For example, the deferred payment facilities at Port Klang. So basically, this slide is to show that we are simplifying the process or streamlining the process, and to make investment approval faster. And I would like to touch a little bit on the special investment program or for the entrepreneurial state concept. So we are focusing on digitalizing the SMEs. So we are providing a cash incentive for the e-post, ERP, and digital payroll system, and then to provide matching grants for implementation of smart automation, and to establish a one-stop digitalization centers to build capacity of the SMEs. So if I go forward in the subsequent slide, you can see that now our recent approach is basically to give matching grants. It's not like a one-way grant. It is a conditional, so-called conditional grant. This is where we are saying that this is a collaboration between the private and public sector. So and basically we are putting everything on the reimbursement basis. The companies has to fork out their money first, and then we match their investment by giving matching grant. And most of the different matching grants has different approach. Some of them are one-to-one, and some of them are not one-to-one. So the current concept is focusing on matching grant. And then we are transforming our local companies to be the global champions. So towards that, we are we are identifying large local companies to be supported so that they can increase their export and to compete in the international market. And for that, we are providing up to 100 million in cash and non-cash incentive to these companies, and to enhance their expansion. And the third so-called program is to attract new multinational companies, and for that we will be expediting our approval process, and we will be focusing on strategic investment, and they also provide again customized incentive in terms of tax incentives and grants for the to attract the new multinational companies. Okay, and for the second strategy, under the accelerating digital economy. Okay, sorry, it's quite hard for me to see from the slide. So let me refer to my notes. Okay, this is basically what I can conclude is the approach is by giving direct grants to enhance the digital economy, and again the matching grants and tax incentives, and of course here the implementing agency is the MDEC, MCMC, and as well as the private company themselves. So for example, we are, in order to enhance our digital economy, we need to enhance our broadband capacity, but now we are using the satellite technology as to enhance the connectivity in the remote areas. Okay, and I would like to touch on the digital stimulus, promoting cashless economy through e-wallets. Okay, this is a new measure. So this is for Malaysian age 18 and above, and with an annual income of up to 100,000 per annum. So the government will be giving so-called stimulus of 30 ringgit to each e-wallet account, and of course the amount will have an expiry date, and So it will be launched in 1st January 2020. So this is to expand the use of digital payment, cashless payment. So we hope that with this new way of doing business or making payments, it will stimulate the consumption, and also it will also stimulate more development in the digital apps like Boost, Grab, and so on and so forth. Okay, and for the strategy number 3, to strengthen the access to financing for business. So of course the general concept or approach is by giving interest subsidies, as well as guarantees, and as well as some of the program the government need to inject some fund. So again, the SJPP will continue to give guarantee, but this time around the fee will be lowered to 0.7%. Because under SJPP, this scheme jaminan pembiayaan perniagaan, there's a scheme for to support the working capital of Bumiputera company, and for them to be more export oriented and to shift to automate their business. So government is charging lower fee for the guarantee, and of course the other DFIs like SME Bank and Bank Bangunan will continue to give loan with lower interest rate, and the differential rate will be subsidized by the government. And we're also increasing the market development grant ceiling under MATRADE. This is for the companies to expand or to enhance their marketing abilities, and to increase their exports into the international market. And they also support for equity crowdfunding through my company investment fund, and this will government will be allocating about 50 million for this purpose. And also there will be tax incentives for venture capital, and now but for next year we'll be introducing a tax incentive for sukuk issuance by the companies. Okay. Next, still under the access to financing, we are also focusing to develop the Bumiputera entrepreneur. So for this, access to financing by Tekun, SME Bank, and Pelaburan Hartanah will be given substantial allocation for them to give financing to the companies. And not forgetting for business loan for Chinese businessmen under BSN, about 100 million, and for Indian entrepreneur loans under Tekun, and 20 million. And another measures is moving forward, we are going to consolidate the DFI to make it more to streamline, and to make it to manage the fund more effectively and efficiently. And recently we have established this Islamic Finance Special Committee on Islamic Finance, which is chaired by our Deputy Minister of Finance, Dato' Amiruddin. And they are formulating the Islamic economic blueprint, and they will given allocation also to create, to do initiative or outreach program and professional courses to develop our Islamic finance. Okay, for strategy 4, to strengthen economic diversity, to enhance Malaysian resilience. So again, we are focusing on green growth and energy. So we are liberalizing the electricity market, and also we will continue the green investment tax allowance, and also solar leasing activities also will be given tax exemption. And we are not forgetting the agriculture sector, as I think agriculture is also one of important contributor to our economic activity. So and part of measures to support the rural development. So we are giving assistance for rainy season to the farmers, to the Felda settlers. We are giving welfare assistance to Felda settlers, and also for FECRA and RISDA participants. Yeah? And also we are increasing the fisherman allowance from 200 ringgit to 250 ringgit per month, and we are also promoting the crop integration, or some people call intercropping. Intercropping, for example, in the palm oil estate, while while waiting for the harvesting season, they between the season they can do other kind of crops. So, and again, the subsidy for fertilizer will be continued, and so basically agriculture is still our main focus in this budget. Okay, for strategy 4, still under strengthening our economic diversity to enhance Malaysia's resilience. So we are continue to enhance the R&D, research and development framework. For this, we will be providing matching grants for the industry, academia in the high value palm oil downstream activity, and also we are going to establish a research management agency. So if you notice, every line ministries have their own research and development agency or department. So we are streamlining under one agency, so that the distribution of resources will be more efficient and effective. And also we will continue to encourage science, technology and engineering and maths at schools. With this, we will be allocating a substantial amount of allocation to make more students to learn in the STEM field. Okay, next, not forgetting this next year will be the Visit Malaysia year. So we'll be providing education for tourism ministry to continue to do their promotion campaign. And with that, we also are giving tax incentives for international, for organizing international conference, and a tax exemption for international theme park projects, and also tax deduction for companies who wants to sponsor arts and cultural activities, and also for tourism vehicles, for example, tourism buses and the light transportation will be given 50% SRCT exemption. And of course, 2030 is also the Malaysia year of healthcare travel. So for that, Tourism Malaysia will be getting education to do the promotion. And again, to simplify the process, visa application process for tourists, so we will be allowing bulk application of visa through e-visa. And then of course, to increase tourism in the northern region, or specifically in Penang, for the funicular services like cable car project in Penang Hill, it will be allocated 100 million for that project. Okay, so next I will go to the second trust, investing in Malaysia. So again, as I said before, this is to strengthen our human capital, because we know that business not as usual anymore in the future. So, and we won't know what kind of jobs will be offered in the future. So we must prepare our current generation, and then we need to enhance our job opportunities, and we have to modernize our labor market. With that, we have to invest more in our training and education system. Okay, so the main highlight is here is the special jobs program or Malaysian at work. I will explain that in the next slide. But before that, there also tax incentive will be given to encourage women to return back to work and to be again in the labor force. And this is also will improve our productivity of the nation. And we will also be giving a double tax deduction for internship program. And next, Employment Act will be reviewed. I think everybody is already aware that to increase the maternity leave from 60 days to 90 days. I think this for the private sector, they will welcome this kind of changes, because for the public sector, the 90 days is already there. So I think the private sector will appreciate more. And then to extend the coverage of mandatory overtime to earning less than 4,000 per month, and also to introduce a provision to prohibit discrimination. So again, as part of social protection program, EPF will extend the coverage to contract workers or independent contract workers. So, and also sometimes people are using the term gig economy. People are working on the independent contract basis, so they can also contribute to the EPF. But this one, I think they need to amend the act, I think. So, and then we will extend the social security scheme by PKSO to other self-employed group across bigger sector, across 18 key sectors. And for under PKSO, we will extend the benefit under ISURI. So like EPF now, the current scheme is government is giving matching grant if the husband contribute 1 ringgit, 5 ringgit to his spouse, the government will match up by 45 ringgit. So that kind of scheme will be expanded under PKSO, but the detailed mechanism will be announced later. Okay, this is again to improve the social protection of the I would say of non-salary worker, non-salary men, and the people who self-employed. Okay, so I would like to highlight the Malaysia at Work program. So the hiring cost equalization, of course, some people argue, can these measures replace the foreign worker? It's quite subjective. It's not as easy as that. But what we are trying to do here is to encourage the employer or the company to hire more locals. So for example, one of their foreign worker, the visa is nearly expired. So instead of hiring the same local worker, maybe they might opt for hiring local worker, because government are giving incentive. For me, quite a significant incentive, 350 and 550 to be given. But of course, in different sectors, there will be different rate. Yeah? But this is to encourage the companies to hire local workers. But of course, the local workers themselves have to willing to work like the foreign workers. Okay. Next, in hiring graduate, this is again part of social. This is not like a normal wage subsidy. It's part of the social protection scheme. This is for workers who are already out of job for at least 12 months, so they can enroll in the scheme. and they will be getting, basically for them, the 500 ringgit for the employee and 300 ringgit for the employer. But basically the whole 800 ringgit is actually for the worker, but it will be in their EPF account. So in some cases, depend on the salary, they might be taking a higher take-home pay because of this scheme. And this is also to encourage to reduce of cost of hiring new worker for the employer. Okay, and then the women participation, the incentive, basically the concept is quite similar, but of course different scheme, there will be different criteria and condition. So again, to encourage women to come back to the labour force. Of course, they must be accompanied by other types of measures like childcare and so on, and child education system. But this is one of the direct measures that we can think of. And for TVET education, this is not will be not implemented by EPF. This is will be implemented by the Talent Corp. So this is basically internship program. So both to encourage the company to give practical training to the TVET student, TVET who are in student who are doing technical and vocational in college, vocational college, for them to gain industrial experience or industrial training in the industry. This is also we increase their skill set apart from getting knowledge in the classroom, so they will get better to enhance their skill on hand job training, and to increase their employability in the future. Okay, strategy. The next strategy is strategy number 7, investing in education and talent. Again, focusing on talent, human capital. So Ministry of Education will be the biggest, one of the biggest recipient of the education, be it from development expenditure as well as operating expenditure. We will be allocating 64 billion to the Ministry of Education. This is again to continue to maintain school and to upgrade the school and to repair and refurbish schools. But priority is to be given to Sabah and Sarawak. And also we are going to implement the zero reject policy for OKU. So no OKU will be discriminated or deprived from their right to get education. So, and then to increase the amount of utility assistance, especially in the schools, in the educational institution. And for TVET education, overall will be 5.9 billion will be allocated for TVET education. This covers various various programs under various number of agencies, and also we are including the state skills development centers as well in this for this education. And again, matching grant for customized TVET courses with industry. So this is again to encourage the industry to do courses for TVET student. And the last bullet is to provide a so-called special route for TVET student to further their study into a degree program in the Malaysian Technical University, like University Technical Melaka, University Technical Malaysian and I forgot the two universities. Okay, this is because of the current TVET certifications. When they are trying, the TVET student, when they are trying to getting job, it's quite hard for them to get job. Sometimes companies require degree, so we are providing a special route for them to get degree in these technical universities. Okay, the third thrust, the third thrust is to create a united, inclusive, and equitable society. So this is again part of the effort to reduce the gap, to increase income opportunity, and to reduce the imbalance regional development. Okay. So under for narrowing the rural and urban divide, 10.9 billion will be allocated, and this is for expanding the rural roads, improving the access to clean water, rural electrification, and this is a new thing. We are spending the MARIS grant to cover more scopes. For currently, the scope is just to MARIS grant is a road grant, building road grant from the federal to the states. So currently the condition is just for roads, but now we are spending to building to improve drainage, bridges, and road and slopes, and so on and so forth. Not just the normal road per se. And we're also doubling the special grant for Sabah and Sarawak under the Article 112D Federal Constitution. Sabah and Sarawak have the right to receive a grant from the federal government, and currently they are receiving Sabah 26.7 million, Sarawak is 16 million, and this rate has been there for a long time, I think since late 60s or early 70s. So now we are recognizing the importance of Sabah and Sarawak. So we are revising upward the grants from 27 to 53 and from 16 to 32, and the amount will be doubled by 2025 to 107 million and 64 million respectively. So this shows that we are serious in reducing the imbalance with both West and East Malaysia. Okay, again, focus on Sabah and Sarawak. So this is just to show the trend, the federal grants. This is direct grant to Sabah and Sarawak. Since 2015 and until September this year, we have paying about 5.3 billion to Sabah and 5.8 billion to Sarawak, total for the past 5 years. And apart from direct grants, we have to also take into account the federal government projects in Sabah and Sarawak. So sometimes people are just saying the amount, the cash that they receive, but indirectly there are more indirect allocation spent for Sabah and Sarawak, for rural water project, for rural electrification and rural road and connectivity. So basically the projects amount are much bigger than in Semenanjung, in Peninsula. Okay. Under Trust 3 for Strategy 8. Okay, this is again for the vulnerable or for the targeted groups. We are giving subsidies. The subsidies program still continue, but more targeted. Subsidies increased from 22 billion to 24 billion, and we are expanding the Bantuan Sara Hidup (BSH) the payment to single, because in the last budget singles are not getting the BSH, but recognizing some of the single people age 40 and above, some of them are not in job, out of job, and having difficulties. So we are spending for age 40 and above, and for OKU as well. And we are expecting to have a number of recipient increase to 5 million beneficiaries. So, and for social assistance and community development, we continue to be given emphasis, and we have this 3R program, replace, repair, and reuse. Okay, this is to under JKM. So to enhance the maintenance, culture of government asset. Okay, so there are some other programs, tax incentives, tax deduction, tax relief, and for individual like us, we are increasing the relief for childcare from 1,000 to 2,000. Okay, and then also we have a tax deduction for wakaf religious authorities and for wakaf, but we are, as a pilot project, we are starting with contribution to religious authorities and to public universities first. And then not forgetting the orang asli, we will continue to enhance their welfare and to develop their community, and for that we are giving both 140 million for next year. Okay, still under strategy 8 for inclusive and equitable development. We are giving initiative for Indian community through Mitra. It's about 100 million, and to ensure Bumi Putra entrepreneur or contractor in the construction sector, in the providing service to the government and goods. So for G1, grade G1 registration and ministries, they have to offer at least 30% of the tenders to Bumi Putra. Okay, this is again part of reducing the gap. Yeah. Okay, and of course we need to uphold our Islam. So we are giving allocation to Islamic affairs under Prime Minister Department, especially for JAKIM, and for this time we will increase the Kafah teacher monthly allowance by 100 ringgit because their allowance has not been reviewed for quite a long time. So, but we have to recognize their contribution in the community, because in the rural area, like Tadika Kemas, in the Kafah, and so Tadika Kemas and the Kafah teacher, they are doing. They're also developing the rural children in terms of education. So we are giving higher allowance for them. And then we have a one-off bonus for Imam Bilal, the person who responsible to looking after the mosque, and also for Guru Takmir, and another initiative under Rahmatan Lil Alamin. Okay. Okay, for strategy 9, focusing on improving our healthcare services. So total allocation for healthcare services, this is for Ministry of Health, about 31 billion. It is an increase from 28.7 billion this year. So again, to continue to construct and upgrade and expand the existing hospitals, and as well as health and dental clinics, and we are upgrading the medical equipment. And for the first time, we are introducing this pneumococcal vaccine for children, because currently when we want to get this kind of vaccination, we have to go to the private clinic, and I informed that it costs about, is it 200 ringgit? Last time, 3 years ago, about 100 ringgit I spent, less than 200 ringgit for my youngest kid, but now it has increased to 200 something. So taking this importance of our children to have a proper vaccination, so we are introducing the pneumococcal vaccine for the children, and for that we are allocating 60 million for the vaccination. We are also expanding the My Salam and Peka B40 program. Okay, so for My Salam, before this, it only covers 55 illnesses, 36 illnesses. Now we are expanding to cover 45 illnesses. Okay, so insurance scheme. So if they are diagnosed to have this kind of illnesses, they will be compensated 8,000 ringgit. So Masalam is an insurance scheme, and for Perak is a free screening health services. Okay, so for Perak B40, last time it's just for 65 years, and 55 years to 65 years, but now we are spending to person of 40 years and above can also have this free screening services under Perak B40. Yeah? Okay, and again, not forgetting the transportation system to increase connectivity within the city or intra-city or intercity through the Prasarana company. They will purchase a new 500 electrical buses. This is also in line with supporting the environmental agenda of the nation. And we'll be giving subsidy for the last mile connectivity. And again, we will continue to upgrade the rail tracks in Sabah. And also for the Johor Causeway congestion, in addressing this congestion, 85 million will be allocated to immigration department, basically to renovate the CIQ building, and also to reduce the congestion by consolidating the, if you have been to Singapore by driving or by road, you have to first touch and go, and then you have to go to the next checkpoint to the immigration. But now we are going to consolidate to reduce more time, so that because to reduce traffic congestion. So, and then to reduce highway toll burden, because it is announced that government will in the process of buying the toll concessionaires, so that people will pay less toll in the future. And also, of course, targeted fuel subsidies. So the difference between this in the budget announcement and between the KPN and HCP earlier announcement is KPN and HCP only announced for the BSH recipient, but in the budget 2020 we are spending to non-BSH recipient, for example, in other words, to M40 as well. And but the difference is the B40 will be getting cash credited to their account, and but for non-BSH they will be using the card system. Okay, but of course the amount of subsidies still per month is still the same. Okay, and but for Sabah and Sarawak, the fixed pump price will continue in next year. Okay, for home ownership, we will be introducing rent to own financing scheme. The scheme is where the government will provide 30% guarantee. So, for example, the mechanism will be announced soon. And then for RPGT, we will revise the base year from 2000 to 2013 to better reflect the current market price. And maintenance of public housing, we will continue to maintain public housing. And for Safe City Initiative, there will also be given allocation for Safe City Initiative. Okay, and not forgetting sports, because sports can unite as Malaysian. In preparation for the Tokyo Olympic, we will be giving substantial allocation to the sports and youth ministry, and for development of our football team, and for the youth ball club and Malaysia Future Leader and volunteerism initiatives. Okay, so strategy 13. This is basically focusing on conservation of our natural resources, like forests, and also preserving the forests. So as you can see, a number of initiatives or measures, and of course, another thing to help the retired veterans. still have income, we will employ more rangers among retired soldiers and to increase their, to protect the forest, to increase their so-called rondaan in the forest, and also recognizing the importance of Sustainable Development Goal Initiative. Permanent Select Committee on this initiative will be established and will be given a location for them to do their promotion campaign and awareness program. Okay, so the last thrust, last but not least, is the focusing on strengthening the public sector finance and public sector institutions. Okay, so the deficit target, as explained before, we are over the medium term, we are targeting an average of 2.8% of GDP, our fiscal deficit, and revenue, we are tightening up our enforcement activities to avoid tax evasion and tax avoidance, so that we can collect more revenue and to increase our revenue tax base. And we are introducing a new rate for income above 2 million, creating another band for the income tax. And also we will be implementing the tax identification system. This is also to ensure our tax base can be enhanced, because like nowadays, out of the 15 million labor force, only 2 million are paying tax. So there's possibility of people trying to evade or run from paying tax. So this identification number will help us in tracking or capturing those people in the net. Okay, next, the anti-corruption plan, national anti-corruption plan will continue, and we will be establishing an ombudsman to replace the Bureau of Public Companies. And for detention centers, CCTV will be installed in the entry points. Okay, and then I forgot. There's one more quite significant measures of trying to increase our efficiency in the spending, where we are purchasing bulk purchase for medical equipment, because we have different hospitals under teaching hospitals, we have different hospitals under Ministry of Health and different hospitals under MINDEF. So we are pulling every resources to buy the same amount, so to get the better, cheaper price. Okay, so last but not least, to inform everybody that we are not working alone out there in the ministry. We are also taking inputs and suggestions from the public. So we have done various focus group section, and then we are gaining input from portals, our MOF budget portals. So, and also various engagement with the backbenchers. So many of the measures I've explained earlier comes from this type of engagement from backbenchers, from portals, from focus groups. So just to say that we are listening to the people on the ground and from the society. So with that, I end my presentation. Thank you very much for listening to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Encik Muhammad Rizal, for your insightful speech. And please remain on the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, now it's time for the panel discussion session. I'm honored to invite the moderator, Professor Dr. Ye Kim Ling, to take the reserved seat on the stage. Next, may I invite our notable panelist, Mr. Benedict Francis, Associate Professor Dr. Halimatun Burhan, Dr. Muhammad Shahrin Madrus, and Encik Noor Zahidi alias. And distinguished panelists from Ministry of Finance, Encik Imri Dohadi Abdul Wahab and Puan Mashita Ismail. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me to warmly welcome the moderator, Professor Dr. Ye, and all the panelists for today's session. Without further ado, I pass the floor to the moderator. Thank you.
Thank you to the MC. Very good afternoon. Let me start off by saying that, of course, in the opening remarks, Tan Sri has set the stage nicely in terms of expecting an expansionary budget, giving the rationale for why mildly expansionary budget is necessary, given the downside risks and the slowing global economy and all that. And of course, very important, the budget presentation by Encik Muhammad Rizal, he has highlighted the key thrust of Budget 2020. The aim is actually to create growth, generate growth, and then importantly, to have a true entrepreneurship, and then importantly, ensuring that we are able to achieve also the shared prosperity vision in terms of reducing income inequalities and importantly, sharing prosperity. So he has given a very comprehensive, detailed analysis about 15 strategies in the 4 major trusts, and these trusts basically cover growth, cover Malaysians in terms of elevating their skills and employment opportunities. So that's on the Malaysian at Work, a very interesting program, and also very important on the creating an inclusive society. And then finally, unlike it was the first trust in the last budget on the governance, but this time around they still maintain it because I think institutional reforms still continues to be a very major important, but now of course in the second year of the new government's emphasis is now more on economy. So with that, we have 4 very distinguished panelists, each one from different backgrounds, from private sector, from the academia, from rating agency, and then of course Dr. Shahrin from both. He has both background from private sector, back to the government, and government now back to the private sector. So we'll start off with by giving each panelist 15 minutes. I think it's okay, 15 minutes if you have time, so we can cover that. Hopefully, if you have questions, we'll hold back to the last. We start off in order as we have advertised in the flyer. So without further ado, let's hear from each of the panelists to see what are their reactions from their own perspective, as well as importantly, what do they think of the budget 2020? Because as the Tan Sri has mentioned, it affects everybody, and it's important that everyone see what's in it in the budget for them and how they can respond in terms of the incentives and the opportunities that are provided. Because without each one of us responding to what the budget intends to do, then of course the effects of the budget would not be, we will not likely see any effect at all if there's no response from the private sector or no response from rating agency. So very important, let's hear from them first. So without further ado, we start off with the first panelist, Mr. Benedict Francis, a tax partner from PricewaterhouseCoopers based in Johor Bahru. So you have your 15 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. Good afternoon, everyone. A couple of observations from Encik Rizal's speech, and also I think my take on overall perspective in terms of how I think the country should head towards as far as the tax measures are concerned. It's not the view of my firm, it's my personal view, all right? So I better caveat that. I think in terms of the economic growth of about 4.8%, I think a lot of people, including some of the economists, are rather surprised as well, because it's quite ambitious, especially in view of the global economic slow down, and some are expecting a downturn even. So 4.8%, very ambitious. In fact, my personal view, I thought it should be lower than this year, right? So I think going forward in terms of the key driver, it's still private consumption growth, but still cautious of the challenges of the global environment. In terms of what might happen, the government might introduce certain stimulus measures, though they have announced certain measures, but I think it'll be a bit of a watch and see situation as to how the global environment reacts and to see what sort of measures that they should put forward. They have spoken about a budget deficit of 3.2%. So if certain measures needed to be put in place, I think it will be higher than 3.2%, personally, I feel. In terms of government's revenue, as you can see, or you saw from Encik Rizal's presentation, the revenue is dropping, all right, from 263 billion to 245 billion. But there is also a very big gap in terms of imbalance of operating expenditure versus development expenditure. So what caught me by surprise was that there was not much of an effort, in trying to manage the operating expenditure. And I think it is quite, I would say, expected that the government is trying to manage the development expenditure side of things in view of, our debt situation. So it's quite expected. I think in terms of the next steps, if you look at FDIs, Malaysia has been a beneficiary of the US-China trade war to some extent, but Malaysia is, quite in competition with some of our regional neighbors, right? For example, if you talk about Vietnam, Vietnam is a low-cost jurisdiction. And also I think in terms of access to US, they get better access as compared to the other countries. And if you talk about Singapore, and the recent Hong Kong protests, if you have read in the press, Singapore seems to be benefiting from some of these, inflows. We thought Malaysia could benefit, especially, where I'm based in Johor. If you talk about the Iskandar region, there are quite a lot of high-rise properties. I'm sure you heard about Forest City and all that. So I think there was some buzz where, we were expecting, or rather our government, or rather our IRDA were expecting some inflows into Forest City. But I think we have not heard much about it. So if you talk about Indonesia, the size of the markets are huge. So, they have kind of benefited to some extent as well. So we are in competition with our regional neighbors. And therefore, Malaysia has to do something about this, especially in terms of trying to attract FDIs, in this budget, I was kind of expecting some sort of a big push. And there are some measures being introduced, which is quite interesting as far as the FDIs are concerned. And I think in terms of, clarity, there is some sort of clarity in terms of the country's approach to navigating the digital and high-tech economy, and this is what caught me by surprise, and I think was a pleasant surprise to some extent, because what we are trying to do is that we are trying to introduce certain incentives, customized incentives for Fortune 500 and the global unicorns. So that's quite interesting, and we are inviting the big players, and I think there is also quite a big push to invite China investors to come into Malaysia. So that's quite promising to some extent, and I hope that in terms of the mechanism or in terms of the framework that the government might come up with at some point, I hope that things will be clear. There's a lot of clarity, there's a lot of proper sort of framework put in place, so that in terms of trying to hand out some of these incentives, we are quite forthcoming. Yeah. So on that point as well, there is also this National Committee of Investment, that has been introduced, and I think they'll be strengthened further, where the domestic and foreign investments approvals will be more forthcoming. So I hope all this ties hand in hand and things get moving a lot faster. So the other incentives is that for Malaysian businesses who are going to export or can prove that they can export in a big way, and also to create high value jobs. This is something that is quite interesting as well. And the other one is a 10-year income tax exemption for IP generating income. And this is quite interesting because the YB Lim Guan Eng did mention about modified nexus approach, which is not many people might be familiar with, but I think in a nutshell what it tries to say is that you need to develop the IP in Malaysia, right? Rather than subcontracting it out of the country, develop it in Malaysia, all right, and generate income out of that IP in Malaysia. So I think this is quite a big push, right? Because in the past, I think IP was not a real focus. We take IPs from other foreign countries and we use those IPs and we end up paying royalty or licensing fees. But what we are trying to do now is we are trying to reverse the situation, which is quite good because then Malaysia truly benefits. Yeah. So the other interesting point that I would share is the risk sharing between government and private sector in terms of what was presented earlier, scheme jaminan pinjaman perniagaan for the SMEs, and the other one is the rent-to-own financing scheme. So these are two quite interesting approach because if you talk to the man out there, the SMEs out there, they always struggle to get financing from the banks, right? There's not much support. Banks are very cautious. I've got friends in the banks, and they themselves say that there's a lot of profiling going on as far as individuals are concerned, and they are quite careful about handing out loans. So I think this is something that is quite interesting, and I think quite welcoming from the government. And we hope that this will be implemented properly, and we hope the SMEs will actually benefit from all this. Yeah. Some of the other interesting tax measures maybe I want to mention is that in terms of the corporate tax measures, we did not see anything in a big way. But what my wish list is to see Malaysia, maybe not this year or next year, but going forward to restructure its tax landscape or tax framework. What I would like to see is we need to shift the balance between indirect and direct tax because currently Malaysia is so reliant on direct taxes. Yeah, I think the percentage is something like 65-35 indirect. I think we need to see a shift, right? And a lot of our neighbors or even countries globally, they have moved into that. There's a lot of emphasis on indirect tax and less direct emphasis on direct taxes. So with the increase in personal tax rate for those earning 2 million ringgit and above in terms of chargeable income, where the rate is now 30%, I mean, the first thing that came to my mind was this Robin Hood. I'm not saying steal from the rich and give it to the poor, but it's more like we take from the rich and give it to the poor. Nothing wrong in that. Nothing wrong in that. But, let's look at it as, we need to help, where we can help, right? So that's the first thing that came to my mind. I was laughing to myself when I was watching the speech, right? So that really, that is something that I didn't expect because when they introduced 28%, I thought, okay, that was a kind of a regressive move because especially when you're trying to bring in, talents back into Malaysia, where Malaysia is suffering from brain drain, this is not the type of move that you want to make, right? So quite surprising. So in terms of trying to help the SMEs, I think there was not much interesting measures as far as, I think I'm not talking about the micro SMEs, I'm talking about the slightly sizable type of SMEs, right? There was not many measures introduced. I mean, there was a very little small measure in terms of trying to increase the chargeable income base from 500,000 to 600,000, where your tax rate is 17%, and trying to put a cap in terms of the net revenue of 50 million. So I think that was not really a big move, I would feel. But I think a lot more can be done in that area to help the SMEs to grow. But what's interesting is the automation capital allowance incentive. That was extended in terms of trying to make sure that some of these companies upskill rather than rely a lot on laborers, manual laborers. So that's very welcomed. In terms of E&E sector, okay, that was quite interesting as well, because E&E sector traditionally they enjoy a lot of pioneer status and investment tax allowance when they first invest in Malaysia. But I work with a lot of E&E sectors, they are my clients, and they struggle to get incentives these days. So I think it's quite welcoming in terms of especially those who have exhausted their reinvestment allowance or even their earlier incentives. So what the government is introducing is that they're giving an ITA of 50%. Which is welcome indeed. So let's wait for the Gazette order, because we don't know the specific details to that. I'm sure it comes with certain conditions, and we need to see what those conditions are. All right. The other one I would say is the green technology incentive. So the government, as you know, is trying to move into green, right? Green ITA, green income tax exemption. So there's an extension to that as well, which is good. It's kind of expected, all right? It'll be quite a shame if you actually put a stop to that and forget about that altogether. The other one which caught me by surprise is penalty. Okay, so for example, if you don't pay your taxes on time, there is a penalty of 10%, and then beyond 60 days, there's another 5%. So what caught me by surprise, and it's a welcome surprise, is that they have removed the 5%. All right. So that's good. So we are indeed trying to send the right message to taxpayers out there. So tax them, penalize them 10%, and that's it. Regardless of the time frame to settle your taxes. So the same thing with your estimates and all that. But in terms of special voluntary disclosure program, which just ended, recently. So we need to see what's the next move. We hear a lot about companies that will be audited. The tax authorities will go very hard on these people, and the penalty regime will actually go back to the normal rates, and the maximum is 300%. Yeah. So question is whether the field audit framework will apply, which is the 45% tax rate. So we need to see. And I think on the point of SVDP, my concern is this: whether IRB has gone after those economies, those shadow economies, those underground economies. Don't know whether they have gone after these people. Right? We don't hear anything about that. But what we hear is that the people who actually IRB went after are those in the IRB system. Right? So I received letters, I'm sure all of you received letters as well. So we are in IRB's system, okay? But what's interesting, and I would like to see happen, is we go after the people who don't pay taxes, who don't file their tax returns, okay? How do you do that? I leave it to the authorities to figure that out, but I'm sure there are resources that we can deploy and make it happen, right? So I'll stop there. I don't know whether I've taken 15 minutes, but thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Benedict, for a very wide-ranging response to the budget. If I were to put it to you from a score of 1 to 10, which I will ask every panelist, how would you rate the budget? What would be your score?
Okay, it's a bit of a balance, all right? So I did not raise my expectations too high. I more or less expected it to be this way. But there are certain surprises as well, pleasant surprises. So I would rate it as 6.
6, okay, thank you. Okay, from the private sector, from a tax perspective, let's move on to more from academia, from the university side, given that they play a very important role, especially in the second trust, raising up Malaysians and ensuring that we do have the human capital to transform Malaysia into a high-income, or what you call a developed nation by 2030. So without further ado, let me welcome Associate Professor Dr. Halimatun Bohan, Associate Professor in Economics, Faculty of Business and Management, UiTM Melaka, your homegrown panelist.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Actually, just now everybody have listened to Mr. Rizal. He already explained regarding Budget 2020, in which Budget 2020 has outlined a wide range of initiative, action plans, fiscal measures and incentive seeking to address the challenges that Malaysia is facing, which include setting the new growth direction, intensifying growth momentum, addressing high cost of living and increasing the income level of the rakyat. So the government is actually cognizant about driving growth in the new economy and digital era. Okay, so as what we know, government is planning to spend 297 billion next year, hoping to stimulate Malaysia's economy during a global slowdown while maintaining a fiscal deficit of 3.2% of GDP. So compared to this year's deficit projected at 3%, the 2020 figure is significant, 0.2% higher. So I agree that with the government spending more, there is a higher chance Malaysian consumer will also spend money and this would stimulate the economy to grow. However, a high deficit is actually generally bad because it may throw the government off track in achieving its economic goals. So again, actually I agree that our deficit is still manageable because it seems to be 0.2% higher compared to last year. But I am not sure that increased government spending will actually result in continued growth in economy. So many sectors actually have been allocated to a lot of money in Budget 2020, despite the world economic slowdown, as we can see, cautioning that this generosity could drain the treasury actually in the long run. So what are the actions actually that will be taken by the government in order to curb these problems and how government will implement it? Okay, so that will be the first issue, right? And as what we know, government also projected 4.8% economic growth for the year 2020. Will the country's deficit be far more than what was projected for next year, which is 3.2%, if the assumptions are wrong and government revenue be affected? Okay, as what we already observed in 2018, the federal deficit was at 54.2 billion. For 2019, it was projected to be at 52.4 billion, and a deficit value of 3.2% for next year translates to a deficit of 52.5 billion. So this actually meant federal debt would be at 850 billion next year, where if a similar debt trend continues for the next 3 years at a rate of more than 50 billion, added on each year, the federal debt actually would reach the 1 trillion mark in 2023. Such a trend actually will also affect the debt to GDP ratio, which was at 48.7% in the first quarter of 2018, to increase cost by a high deficit value. So this actually shows the space for the government to introduce a stimulus package should there be an economic crisis is very limited. So the question is what and how government will do if there is an economic crisis happen to be next year, and do the nation deficit is decreased or not? So that will be the second issue. And I also have the last one. This is actually regarding taxes, because as what we can see from Budget 2020, the income tax exemption of 100% of statutory income or investment tax allowance of 100%, which is to be set off against 70% for 5 years for new investment in international theme park projects will be given. So as we know, the main sources of government revenue is actually come from taxes. So if this income tax exemption is given, how government will go up from its budget deficit and at the same time to stimulate economic growth? So that's all from me. Maybe later our representative from Ministry of Finance have any suggestion regarding that.
Thank you. We will leave the response to Encik Muhammad Rizal later on, perhaps on the issue of what they call this, whether, first of course, whether the forecast is too optimistic, 4.8, and then the debt sustainability, the Fed deficit, all these questions. What would be your rating for in terms of budget satisfaction? Budget satisfaction. Benedict has a score of 6. What about yours?
Maybe balance 5.
Okay, 5 is about neutral. Huh? Okay, next we have Dr. Muhammad Shahrin Madros, formerly from Madrid. He was a CEO of Madrid, but he's currently with EAT Technique. I was told he's an oil and gas supplier. So he knows both perspective from the private sector as well as government sector. So without further ado, Dr. Shahrin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I would like to thank Malaysian Economic Association for inviting me as part of the panelists. It's a really honor to be here among all the enlightened people on this forum. Secondly, I'm supposed to speak on behalf more on representing the industry. So while all my past caps are there, but I don't want to take this as an issue and add more headache for Mr. Rizal. I'd rather take from a different angle so that we can see from my perspective of being in the corporate world, going into the government, start on my business, and then coming back into the corporate world and understand the implication of the budget. One of the challenges that I see that we have in setup like this is, poor MOF people got to explain why the numbers are there, whereas the contribution from this are actually coming from so many ministries. And the reason why it happened that way, whether it's Ministry of Economy and others, I believe should be here as well to be talking about this. So I don't envy you. Okay, let's get that over with. So from this perspective, industry is, I think, quite simple in terms of when we look at budget. It's really a financial mechanism to nudge the economy or the direction of the economy to whichever way that you want to move. Yeah, and from industry perspective, it's always about how do we make ourselves more competitive. How does this budget give us the leverage to compete out there, whether it's being labor, cost, capital, technology, and all the things that's been mentioned. And I think, to be fair, I think the budget is quite good in that sense that it covered all those, it takes up all those points in terms of making the economy, or rather giving to the industry players some leverage to play. The question more is in terms of how effective are those things that have been put on the table to enable the industry to be competitive? I'd like to take a big a step backwards in terms of to understand the scenario we're in. You see, until 1965-67, we are very much an agrarian economy. We depend on tin, minerals, as well as rubber, and that contributes, almost 90% of our economy, and less than 10% into manufacturing. Where we are now in 2019, we are 84% manufacturing and less than 16% on mining, which is more on oil and gas. Tin has gone down so low, and on agriculture is more now palm oil. Yeah. So we have reversed our economy from agrarian economy to a manufacturing economy. That's one. Secondly, in order to industrialize, back in the late 60s, early 70s, moving forward, we focused very much on investment. So FDI was, the big in a way to move forward, and MIDA was created in 1967 to promote investment. And now in 2019. We still hear about FDI and we still focus on investment. Madrid was created in 1995, where we have probably around 200,000, 300,000 companies, local companies. Now we have 1.2 million, the latest numbers, but if based on 2016 consensus, I think it's about 970,000 companies, right? So we have a huge number of companies now, but yet we're still talking about FDI, and not so much emphasis on DDI or local players. That's one of the thing I think that we need to look on. Yeah, really use that to move. And why I say that is because, you know, with the current scenario on globalization, protectionism, and whatnot, what we see is the moment our economy is highly dependent on foreign investment, and with protectionism going on, you know, we have some, lack of a better word, provocative leaders in the other side of the continent that calls back all their industry, and we're stuck. Because, you know, it's like a resource curve, right? A resource curve where you depend your economy entirely on resource, and suddenly when the resource goes off and you don't have anything to rely on. And here, our economy is highly dependent on manufacturing coming from FDI. What are we doing about our own domestic companies? I think that's important. Now, the third point. Look from that angle and say, okay, so we have 970,000 companies. Let's round it to 1 million company in Malaysia. We know that out of that 1 million company, 98.6% of those companies are SMI SME. Yeah, that means those are companies that has revenue. Let's just talk about revenue. Don't talk about number of employees. We have 98.6% SMI SME, which has a revenue of less than 50 million, right? And from a mid-tier company, which is from 50 million to 500 million annual revenue, we have about 1.2%, and less than 0.5% are the large company. Translating that into numbers, we are talking about, you know, 900 over 1,000 SMI SME, 40 to 60,000 probably in terms of mid-tier company, and less than probably 10,000 large companies, or probably less than 5,000 large companies. You know, the irony is this: we are highly dependent on the SMI SME. SMI SME contributes something like, in terms of, I think, employment, I think it's about, number that I have. It's, hold on. So you look at, in terms of SMI SME, employment 65% for the SMI SME, you know, but the exports by the SMI SME is only 23%. So, you know, what makes things worse is that 98%, almost 75% are micro SME. So what I'm trying to say here is this: when we put our numbers to nudge the economy to move forward, we need to be very clear in terms of which segment of the industry that we want to move. That's one. So to me, it's still not clear. I mean, we have a very broad, you know, way of looking at things, and I think this broad brush is trying to paint across industry, which to me there are segments that are quite different. Yeah, the SME are quite different than the mid-tiers and quite different with the large company. And the difficulty is that within SME itself, we have so many smaller SME. Fourth point: when you look at SME and you look from the categories point of view, our total trade currently is about 1.4 trillion ringgit. Okay, now 36% of our export is coming from E&E. There are about 5 sectors that contribute something around 65% of our total export. Yeah, first is E&E, that's the biggest contributor. Then we have oil and gas, chemicals. They contribute around 14%, 12-14%. You know, and then we have machineries, equipment. Again, another about 5-6%. Then we have palm oil. Metals, again another 5-6%. You see, the irony is this: so if we were to compete and grow our industry, should we not, by policy or by principle, look at the area that we are good at, where we're strong, and we should then incentivize those areas and compete? That's one way of looking at it. The other way is to say, hey, what are the new blue ocean area where there are less competitor? Why do we want to compete in an area that's already very crowded? That's another area. Probably that's been looked at. Yeah, I mean, you see a lot of syndication that the government has done, but I think that's where the difficulty in this kind of forum, because all you have is the outcome, and MOF got to explain why it is such. So like again, I don't envy him. I don't want to pile more things on his head. But see, this is where the challenge is, right? We need to have a very clear direction on which sector we want to trigger. There are some syndication, for example, in the current budget, we talk about E&E. We do focus on E&E. Yeah, E&E being 36-point-something% of our export is a very big contributor. But how many people realize that 96% of the FDI that goes into 96% of FDI, 96% of the 36% are from FDI. Less, 4% are DDI, meaning that it's a big portion of the E&E are actually contributed by foreign companies, not local companies. Yeah, we do have. I'm sure if you talk to ministries, we have a couple. They'll quote a couple of local players. Yes, we are. We do have, but we need to be more aggressive. That's what I'm saying. We need to be more aggressive in terms of developing that value chain, because we already have the basis and we should focus, and that's the right thing to do. Go into E&E, and that's another good example. We put some money on e-games, the future, where e-gaming, the new generation are going into multimedia, data, and whatnot. These are good area, but I didn't hear anything about. There are about 8 segments that I see that has huge potential. Aerospace, there's a lot of talk, but it covers broadly in terms of without even mentioning about it. We just say that these are we want to encourage investment, but we don't focus on specific sector. Halal, for example, is a big sector. It's a big contributor. The irony is this: in our SME, the 70-odd% of the micro SME, many of them are into F&B. More of them are into food production. That's why halal is a big thing, right? But when you look in terms of resources, in terms of materials, we are not competitive. Thailand is producing a lot more cheap products, cheap raw materials. Indonesia is the market. Indonesia is 10 times bigger than us. You see, Malaysia is 32 million population. Indonesia is 320 million. Thailand is already 120 million. Vietnam is 90 million. Everybody around us is bigger than us, minus Singapore, minus Brunei. Okay, so we do not have the size. Okay, whatever that we can produce is not going to be as competitive as the others, because they have the market. That's one thing. So to me, the irony is, halal industry is 40 billion industry. Yeah, and out of that 40 billion, 20 billion is in ingredients and 20 billion is in products. And yet, our funding, our Islamic banking, or Islamic finance only contribute something like 2% of that halal industry. What happened to all the other 38 billion? Funding is coming from somewhere else. So what I'm trying to say is this: we need to milk the value chain. And that's the thing that I do not see. Because, we need to understand that the competition is getting more and more stronger around us. We need to be looking at area that we can compete or outcompete our competitor. Instead of producing cheap product, we should go into technology. We should be going into IPs. And IP is a good thing in there, right? We should be going into area where they can produce the goods in Indonesia or Thailand or Vietnam, but we take care of the marketing, we take care of the branding, we take care of all the soft part on the financing. These are the areas that to me is I don't see it because maybe I'm just not aware of it, but I hope that those are the areas that we need to be looking at, not compete on the same crowded area. We're not going to win. Rest assured, we are already hearing that we are skeptical about growing at 4%. But the reality is Indonesia, Philippines is growing at almost 9% compared to us. It's double than us. So that's where the challenge is, right? But having said all of that, so to me, in short, what I'm trying to say is we need to take a step back and say, hey, we are nudging this, we're doing this financial thing to nudge the industry, and we should nudge the industry that make us competitive. We should be putting a lot more money on domestic investment that can generate jobs. The social part is important. I fully acknowledge the fact that we are in a transition. We cannot be purely looking at performance. There are social things that need to be addressed, and yes, that's valid. So we need to transition, but that cannot be the way forward, because that forever will keep you trapped in that corner, rather than creating jobs, more high-paying jobs that then can elevate everybody moving forward. I think that is the key thing that needs to happen. Understanding these segments is important. I've been like more than 20 years now, 30 years in oil and gas. I know for a fact that it's at least in 2010, it's the single biggest contributor to our economy. But we are still, after 60 years, still, mainly exporting crude, but we are not big on downstream, on creating our own petrochemicals. Only now we are going into Pengerang, coming up, which is the right step. The same thing can be said about palm oil. We are big in terms of, but where is all the petrochemicals and all the others? We are not milking the area that we are strong at, and that is a concern. I think digital is the right way. Logistic is the other thing. Okay, we are at the center of the region. We keep on saying we are, in the middle of the ASEAN region. How much are we pushing on being a logistic hub? We may not own the product, but we can be the guy who transport the product around. And I think Singapore did that extremely well. In the world of digital economy, moving into e-commerce is very, very important. And there are programs in Madrid that does that, but we need to be a bit more aggressive. Transshipment, we really got to really look at, when we talk about export, for example, how much of the export actually, we're trying to find new market. We need to continue finding new market. But how much do we work with the existing FDI in the country that source product locally? So those are the kind of things we need to incentivize those investors that are already here to use local and to work with the local. But here, this is where I feel, my final point that I want to talk about is really moving forward. I see this everywhere around the world where competition is no longer between industry and industry. It's becoming country and country. Industry that goes out there together with their country. They need to have a good collaboration between industry and government in order to compete out there. The Chinese way of doing things is a lot of state-owned enterprises going out with big backing from the Chinese. That's why I think America is finding a lot of difficulty, because Americans are purely trying to do pure market economy, but the current president is now trying to put their finger on saying, okay, that's not a fair competition. So I think we need to realize that as well. So this is where I think the government and the private sector needs to work very closely in terms of syndicating and moving the economy forward, and that's extremely important. There are good sparks and signs that's happening. I do see currently with the current government that there's more syndication. I think that's the first time there is a ministerial syndication among all ministries that was recently done, I think last week at MITI. Never did before. Every ministry is doing it by themselves. And I think, the problem sometimes is we have so many silos where, you don't know what one ministry does against the other. And I think we need to really cross that, because, when you talk about oil and gas, it's not just looking at crude. There's 4,700 companies in the oil and gas sector. It's one of our strengths, but we are not really nudging that to move forward. Apart from E&E, I think oil and gas, because back in 1974 with Petronas coming in, we were literally growing at international standards with Exxon, Shell, and Charigali coming in and whatnot. And after that, we have a series of big companies that starting to become global, like Sapura, like Bumi Armada, Dilium. I can name a handful of companies in that sector that has gone out and become global champions. But what do we have in there that helps this company goes abroad? The contribution from export, for example, moving MDG from 200,000 to 300,000, I think is a good way of moving forward. That's where you help. Moving 15,000 to 25,000 for encouraging people to go out is a good way. But the problem is, like I said back earlier, it's a broad brush. It needs to be targeted, because if not, if you keep on sending, I've seen this personally, when you send micro SME or medium SME, it helps them to see what's abroad, but they would not be able to deliver when the demand comes. You're used to supply, 2 trucks of products over here, but you go to China, they want 2 containers, and you're stuck, and that's very real. And if you do not understand that, you're nudging on the wrong way, right? And to me, this is important. You need to understand what's happening on the ground in order to nudge it in the right way to move forward. Because if not, it's just money going in. It's give a good feeling for a while, but it's not moving the country forward. I think that's important. Yeah. Okay. My last point, don't take too much time here, is basically that. I feel personally that this consultative collaboration, because you see sometimes when you put the money, the biggest segment that get the budget is in the education sector, right? But the R&D, we also talk about the R&D, but there's a lot of R&D going into the university. How do we actually collaborate within the R&D in the universities together with the industry? That needs to happen even more, and that needs to be facilitated by either bodies, agencies, or whatever it is, because the issue is always about delivery. The money is one thing, but the delivery is another. And if we don't have an efficient delivery, you can have whatever ideas in terms of your funding, it's just not moving the needle. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sharin.
It's
and what's your rating?
6.
6.
Yes, I'm going to be a bit
6.
more.
Yeah. Okay, now we turn to a professional rater to give his opinion. Zaidi is the chief economist of Malaysia Rating Corporation, and you also take care of sovereign rating. Yeah, I think it's a good to wrap up the panel's presentations with a very important aspect, which is the rating, because some have said that Malaysian government has crafted the budget with an eye on the rating agency. So let's hear from Zaidi.
Okay, thank you so much. I don't know what to say actually today. Rizal, I'll be on your side today. Because the reason is that 1991, I was in the New Straits Times Press. 1991, that was quite a while ago, criticizing the government. It was good to criticize the government when you're outside. 2002, I was in PM's department, B5, assisting the government. Then I saw the problems, what they were facing, and now back in the private sector, rating the government. So and now I work very closely with the Ministry of, well, not very closely, but we keep in touch because they want to know our opinion, we want to know their opinion as well, and whatever rating we give, well, actually the international rating agencies give ratings to Malaysia, and that actually moves the money in and out from the country, and that actually affect you and me, ringgit, stock market, businesses, and so on. Okay, and what we do is, I'm supposed to have slides here. I'm sorry, I'm the only one who has slides. I apologize, but I just need to defend you, Rizal. I'm helping you, and I can help to answer on the debt side just now, and on GDP side also just now, if you allow me. Very quick one. This is sovereign rating, how we rate Malaysia, and how international rating agencies rate Malaysia. What is it? It's actually the ability and willingness to pay debt. And what debt is that? Is government's debt, not private debt. And where are we? We are A-. These are the rating. Indonesia is there. Thailand is there, lower than us. Singapore is here, AAA. Okay? Doesn't mean that Singapore is the best. No. Okay? No. I can because we also do rating on Singapore as well. Okay? Very quick one. Why is this budget? What is this budget has to do with rating? It's because of this. This budget, whatever that the government announced, in terms of rating, it will actually affect the cost of borrowing. Number two, it affects the sentiment businesses. Number three, the most important thing that we always think of is actually the ringgit, you and me. Okay? Ringgit is very critical because I think recently there has been a study by the authority saying that ringgit is actually the major reason for high food prices actually in Malaysia. To be honest with you, okay, I agree with that. Okay, which part of the budget that the credit rating agencies look at? This is the one: the fiscal, the debt, the strength. Fiscal is actually the revenue. The debt is something which I wish to answer just now on the issue of the debt. Okay, and the economic strength actually the growth and everything else. I'll get the slides to everyone if anybody is interested. This is actually something quite boring actually. Only for those people who are as old as I am. This is the way how it affects us, you and me. Okay, whatever that the government announced, for instance, how many billion, it will have an impact on activities in general, in terms of how it stimulates construction sector, all other sectors as well. Yeah. Number two, it affects the financial market, the stock market, how investors feel about us. Okay. Number three, in terms of ringgit, something that I mentioned just now, and number four, in terms of how businesses can cope with the volatility of ringgit. Okay. And let me see. Just comparison, what we look at in terms of the overall budget when we do the rating is actually this. Yeah. Number one, fiscal balance, the budget deficit just now that the everyone keep on mentioning. If you don't, we're very familiar with the budget gap, it doesn't matter. Just want to compare that this is Malaysia, the red dot there, and this is the median, which is actually there. So we are a little bit worse off in terms of budget deficit compared to countries in single A. We are rated single A. Okay, we are worse off. Number two, we're looking at government debt slightly higher than single A countries. That's the reason why we are rated single A minus. Okay. Number three, the other one is this: government revenue. Our revenue is only about 18% of GDP in general. Other countries in the world, single A is about 35% of GDP. That's the reason why the government is screaming for more revenue. That's the reason why the new tax ban. Okay, I know that that's probably not the best way to do it, but we don't have any other alternatives, to be honest with you, at least from my point of view at this juncture. Okay? Number three, government expenditures in terms of OPEX and DE. OPEX, yes, we need to reduce, but it's not easy to reduce OPEX. 35% of OPEX is actually emolument. The other part of OPEX is actually the debt service. Debt service is about 35 billion. 35 billion is about 14% of revenue. There is a limit set by the Malaysian government. It's called the fiscal administrative rule, which is actually cannot be more than 15%. We have busted that before in years before, but now we are keeping it below 15%. Now, when credit rating agencies look at the debt of a country, they don't look at the debt. To be honest with you, the media has got it wrong. I just need to tell you, okay? We don't look at the debt. We look at the debt service charges. The reason is because no countries pay the debt. No countries pay the debt. They roll the debt over the years. Okay? United States have debt since World War II. They never paid the debt. They roll the debt. Okay? It's just a matter of whether we have sufficient revenue in the future to pay the interest and whatever, and we have to pay on time. That's the key thing. Okay? So when we look at the people talk about 50% of GDP, well, actually it's not 55%. 55% is not the total debt, actually. Okay? The cap is actually on, if I'm not mistaken, is 45. Right, MTB, the MGSs, exactly. Okay. Because I know, because I keep in touch with them all the time. Okay. So actually right now it's about 46%. So we have another 10% to ramp it up if we want to. Okay. But the government is not willing to do it. Okay. At least at this moment. Yeah. Okay. Now the other one is what else? DE, development expenditure. Okay, this is the one which I think a lot of people are talking about. We're going to increase the DE by, which is good, because we need to spend, because we need to get the economy going, need to get everyone to have work and everything else. The only key thing here is that development expenditure in Malaysia, historically, we didn't spend the whole thing. Every year we spend about 80 to 90% of the allocation in the past. Okay, in the past, last year and this year, now the average has gone up to about 54 billion allocation. So kalau, if it's actually 90% of that, it's actually 90% of that. In the past, we had spent about 45 billion per annum, on average about 46 billion. Okay, even though we announced 50, actually we didn't spend that much. Okay, so the key thing is not what has been announced; it's actually what is it that they're going to, or how much they're going to spend. Actually, in the first half of this year, only about 43% of DE has been spent. So we need to ramp it up in the second half. Yeah. Okay, what else? Growth by rating band, we are good. We are good because GDP growth Malaysia is that, and single A countries actually there, lower. Okay. So back to the question of whether 4.8% growth this year is realistic. Our projection is slightly lower. Our projection is about 4.3%. But, okay, this is where the but is. 30 basis point is error. From historical point of view, I've been in research about 29 years in doing this. And I know that it's not that I know of, experience has actually taught me that if the GDP, it says that 4.5%, if it's being announced as 4.8%, it could just be an error term. 30 basis is just an error term. And the more important thing is not that 4.8, 4.5, whatever. It's how much of that actually goes into your pocket, actually. If it's 5%, 6%, 9%, if like Philippines and so on, it doesn't go into my pocket, I couldn't care less. I don't care, because what I need is actually the one that goes into my. That's the reason why the government's intention now is actually to reduce the gap of all this income in between, the household income and the income gap and so on. Yeah. Okay, what else? Digitalization. Yes, those are good measures actually, because I have it there, digital adoption index and women labor force participation. This is actually the World Bank. World Bank has been publishing all the reports saying that we need to get more women working in Malaysia because we can raise the potential of the economy by this much by certain years. Yeah, that one is I tend to agree. Okay. What else? In terms of capital market, this is capital market, bond market. We monitor the issuances of the bonds in Malaysia. There's a lot of issuances coming. And another but here is that the government planned to reduce the government guaranteed debt. So beginning of this year, we actually cut down the forecast for government debt guaranteed bond issuances. Apparently this year is actually a bit more than last year. And with the fact that they're going to take over tolls, plus and so on, that would actually add more of government guaranteed debt actually, at least from the way I see it. Slightly increased, but I think that the overall debt can still be kept at 55% of GDP. Okay, what else? I think that's about it. I've addressed your concern about debt. The GDP, yes. Something else. something about something that you mentioned that I totally agree. What was it? On FDIs, DDI is problematic. Yeah. So the government is looking at domestic direct investment. That's one key area. Which, I mean, the announcement is always on FDI, but DDI I think it's written somewhere there in the last few paragraphs, so that it's keeps a blur there. But I think the overall investment is something that the government is working on very closely, and I think the CRAs, the Moody's, Fitch, and S&P are quite happy with the deficit numbers and so on. The government's effort to trim down the debt and keeping the growth, even though right now the government doesn't have that much money to spend. That's about all. Thank you so much.
Okay. Can I take it that your rating is 8 or 9 out of 10?
I'll put a 7 actually.
That's what you call rating correctness. Now we have about half an hour for questions and answers from the floor. But before that, perhaps we can give Encik Muhammad Rizal, sorry, getting old. Encik Rizal, maybe if you have some very critical issues that you want to answer to respond to our panelists before we open up to the floor, and then if there are no questions, then we'll come back to you to continue your responses to the issues that have been raised. Of course, there are many wide-ranging issues that our panelists have raised.
Thank you very much, Professor. So, of course, we appreciate the input given by all the panelists, and have to thank Mr. Zahidi for rescuing MYF. First, let me address the concern by Professor Dr. Halimatul. So just to add, to give some addition to Encik Zahidi. So we are aware that we are in a deficit mode since 1998, and of course until and unless we are having a fiscal surplus, only then we can repay the debt. But I think we must also look at what have to give the justice for the debt that we incurred. For example, in during the crisis, 1998 and 2008, and we need to pump money, and by that we have to increase our debt. But the more important issue is the efficiency of spending. From the borrowing that we raise, to what extent or to which sector we are spending, and does it create effective outcome or creating economic activities? From my own personal view, it has. Evidence show that in 1998, from a recession of -7%, and we managed to go back to the positive territory of I think still less than 2%, that time 3%. But from that, we are having a positive economic growth. And until in 2008, again we use the fiscal tools to get our economic growth on track again. So, of course, having too much debt can also tighten our flexibility, but you must also look at the fiscal space. Now, when we say about the fiscal space, some people there are some misconception. Fiscal space meaning that you must be in surplus. Not necessarily you must be in surplus to have a fiscal space. Fiscal space means you as long as you still have the ability to borrow. For example, like this is already explained, we are still in the A territory rating, so still in the investment category. So as long as we still have the confidence of the market, we still can have space, we still can borrow. But of course, we are in the Ministry of Finance, in the government, we are taking measures to control the debt, the pace of the debt increase, or the pace. But everything has to be relative to the GDP. Okay. So on top of the rules, administrative rule, and also the act, we have other type of act. We have External Loan Act, where by act we are limiting our external borrowing at only 35 billion. So now we are still around 30 billion, even though we have recently issued the Samurai bond, but still we have still some space on external debt, and also by act we cannot have a negative current account balance. So we are still in the positive. So by hook or by crook, we cannot have a negative current account balance. If negative means we cannot pay the big chunk of the emolument, we cannot pay the debt service charges, so we can be in a bankrupt. So that kind of act or rules still govern us, and still make us our financial position still manageable. Of course, we are taking steps or measures to enhance our revenue, especially to increase our tax base. So as you can see, even we publish in our fiscal outlook report, we are comparing our tax revenue to GDP is 13%. As compared to our regional or peer, we are still far below in terms of tax revenue. So that's why, as correctly pointed by Zaidi, we are to enhance our tax base. So we go. One of the measures is to introduce the tax TIN, tax identification number, in order to also to address Mr. Benedict's concern on to get more people into the tax net. Because we need to have go all out on enforcement. So now with the new government, I think they are allowing, they're giving more empowerment to the tax authorities to do all out on the investment, on the enforcement. And also we are putting, there are some other measures, tax measures that I didn't mention in my presentation. For example, we are installing new scanners, cargo scanners in the ports. Especially we are starting with the port client. So with the kind of scanners, the cargo scanners, one of the way to curb this smuggling and evasion tax, indirect tax evasion. So we are going more on indirect tax collection. And again, we have another type of administrative rule. Our debt service payment cannot be more than 15% of the total OPEX. Just now, Mr. Zaidi was talking about cannot be more than 15% of the revenue, but debt service also cannot be more than 15%. 15% of OPEX. 15% of OPEX. That's been our fiscal administrative, or we call it self-imposed rule, since a long time ago. So, and of course, again, for the tax, GDP growth projection. So we are still believe, of course, like Mr. said, there's a margin of error there, but still 40.8, I think still reachable with the measures that we are introducing to increase consumption. As you can see from my figures just now, private consumption is actually the main driver. It's not because of the private consumption we couldn't achieve that kind of growth. And if you look at the measures, I think it can stimulate private consumption. For example, on the measures to enhance digital economy, I think that's part of to encourage private consumption as well, and using the e-wallets. Who knows? People are interested to use that e-wallet thing and add more money to make more cashless payment, and so you can stimulate the economic growth. And economic private consumption can also be in terms of people traveling in Malaysia. If you can see when you have these long weekends, 3 days, please try to go up north or to the east. You will be stuck in the traffic jam. People are still spending. So I strongly believe that private consumption will be the main driver, and then that's the main basis of our a part of private investment as well. Okay.
Maybe in the result, we see whether we have pressing questions from Melakan audience. Okay, we have one. Any other hands? Questions from the floor? Please identify yourself, your organization, and you have a question to direct to any person here or to Encik Rizal. Please mention it. The rest of you can think about what question you'd like to ask, because I think Melaka, we have very interesting, a lot of incentives given for tourism, for fishermen and all that. You may want to look for further details from Encik Rizal.
Hello, my name is Ramli. I'm from the State Treasury. I just have one question. Not exactly a question, it's a suggestion. When we went through the budget speech, there was no mention about Melaka. But interestingly, there's 3 para just for Penang. That's one. Because I think this comment was also given by the World Bank in a study that was done, I think 5 or 6 years ago, in which they recommended that decentralization should be the way forward for Malaysia. And looking at the budget, I mean, this is going to be the second part, the second terms of the new administration. So we were hoping that there would be some form of decentralization towards state government, smaller states like Melaka. But there was none. And we were, in a way, frustrated with that. Because I think in moving forward, the Ministry of Finance should look into this. How do we empower the state government? Put the trust on us, and we can manage our own financial matters. Not to say all, but at least some portion of it. Thank you.
This is a very big issue, so we will dedicate Encik Rizal to answer it first.
You are talking about, firstly, thank you for your input and question. You are talking about a big reform there. You're talking about a big word of decentralization. It's not that easy to decentralize power from the federal to the state, because you need to amend the federal constitution. But also, of course, you need to So this is because of again, from by federal constitution, you have the state list, the concurrent list, the federal list. So again, the part of national responsibility for education, security, defense, even tourism, even the big items, big ticket item of building up the nation still lies with the federal government, and the state government only left with the local authority function. So of course, every state definitely wants more of the share of the economic pie, economic cake. But in the situation of limited resources, we still need to focus on the less developed state. There are still more less developed state in Malaysia, especially in Sabah, Sarawak, and Perlis, and also even Kelantan. Okay, so we need still to build more infrastructure in less developed states, so that we can reduce the imbalance between the regional imbalance. Of course, we at the Ministry of Finance, unless we are having this concept of reward system, I don't know, state with the highest contribution to the GDP will get more, but I'm not, in the near future, I don't see that kind of system will become in the near future. So maybe my colleague want to add some more?
Yeah, maybe you would like to. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. I think to address Encik Ramli's question, very interesting because Melaka is close to my heart as well. Though I'm based in Johor, I look after the southern region, which includes Melaka. All right, many years ago, Melaka was pretty vibrant with multinationals here, right? Especially Japanese multinationals. What happened to them? They have disappeared. We had a lot of up-and-coming construction projects. Okay, with the change of government, of course, the policies have changed, and that has gone as well. So, very valid. I'm concerned as well. What's going to happen to Melaka, right? Looks pretty stagnant. The results have gone down in terms of the so-called GDP or whatever for Melaka. If I'm not wrong, it's minus 14.1%, something like that. Yeah, so what do you have to do? Because you're right, Penang got a mention, Johor got a mention with a causeway. All right, what happened to Melaka? To keep it short, I guess the Melaka state government have to make a little bit more noise. All right, you need to, yes, you need to make a little bit more noise to be noticed. Otherwise, you'll probably just fly under the radar. All right, so that's my advice for next budget.
Thank you, Benedict. Any other questions from the floor? Any more questions, floor? Yes.
Okay, I'm Dr. Rahim from UiTM Melaka. Okay, my question is about the decision by the government to reduce the housing price of the luxury housing price from 1 million to 600,000. I think this actually shocked many of us. Okay, because of the rising price of house is one of the big issue in Malaysia right now. So, what is actually the real reasons of the government's action to do that? What is actually the short-term and the long-term implication? Is it something to do with actually one of the way to strengthening up our currency, or perhaps maybe because we want to boost up the consumption for in terms of facing the global recession next year? I would like to hear some a valid justification from the government. Yeah, that's all. Thank you.
Any other questions? We can collect a couple of more questions and then we'll pose it to the panelists. Yes, please. The lady there. Oh, Dato', you'll be next.
My name is Maria. I'm an academic staff from Multimedia University. Now, most of the things that have been discussed during this post-budget debate mostly is more towards economic growth, try to reduce the cost of living, try to reduce the problems of the government's debt. But what about the concern towards the environment? Because mostly we also have a problem of waste. How actually companies or firms try to dispose their waste properly, and sadly there is no also allocation in the budget towards on how to overcome the environmental problem. So I would like to ask the comment on that. Second one is referring to the allocation on the higher education. Okay, higher education. So there is no such points or insight that is focusing on the higher, especially private higher education. So in terms of promoting or encouraging more R&D or research and development. Okay, so that is my questions. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. That's a second question. Two questions from the lady. And Dato', yeah.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm Ahmad Kamil from Yayasan Melaka. I think I'll just to add regarding the questions on environment. The green energy, I hope the government will consider the WTE, waste to energy incentive for feed-in tariff, because it has been put out from the green energy. Others, solar still get it, but WTE, the incentive has been put out. So if you look at Sweden, they encourage people to, not only they encourage people, they import waste to be put into their WTE, so that they have renewable energy. But unfortunately for Malaysia, it's the other way around. So I hope someone noticed this. The second thing is on Maris. Just now we mentioned about Maris. Once upon a time I was in Melaka, and we managed to use this allocation to make Melaka very clean. But unfortunately now Maris is being used just for potholes and maintenance and things like that. And cleansing of the roads and cutting of grass have not been part of that budget or allocation. I mean, they have it, but it's 3 months once. I mean, 3 months once the tiger can live in the bushes. So we need twice a month grass cutting to make sure that it's presentable, especially in Melaka where a lot of tourists come. Then we're talking about TVET. With a lot of foreign workers in Malaysia, the construction industries do not require people with TVET unless there is regulations like the chargeman certificate, where for you to handle electrical anything with electrical and power, you need to have the chargeman certificate, and they get quite good pay for this certificate. Unfortunately, you can take any Tom, Dick and Harry to just do anything, tiling, construction from any other country. So people with this kind of certificate do not have opportunity to get a good salary. If you go to Australia, there are some Malaysians with this certificate going to Australia. They can have quite a good living. I mean, they have got bungalows, they have got boats and things like that. But if they stay here in Malaysia, I think they will remain with their kapcai. Okay, so we need another thing. I mentioned just now during our coffee is on foreign workers or foreign laborers. We need to actually emphasize on mechanization. Only after the organization have or industries have embarked on mechanization, then they can get foreign workers, not the other way around. Because I'm living in Icro. In the evening, you can see a lot of foreign workers in the food industries, and we know that all the work in confectionaries and sweet industries and things like that can be mechanized, but people are not, the industries are not investing because there is no incentive. If we create these incentives, we will create employment for our university graduates that learn mechatronics, system controls and things like that. But unfortunately, we are not providing this kind of jobs for our graduates. We come up with a lot of graduates, but we don't offer employment. So we need to look at this also. And another thing also, just now I mentioned about foreign workers. It is unfair competition with the locals. The reason is the locals, they have got to rent their own houses. And if they get the same amount of salary with the foreign workers, then they cannot compete. The foreign workers, they can live 20 people in a house, but don't expect our people to put their grandfather, their mother, their children, 20 of them in the same house. So we have got to look into this. So my concern about foreign workers is the repatriation of our money abroad, which will reduce the value of ringgit. So if Malaysian working abroad is okay, they repatriate the money back. But if we take a lot of foreign workers, and I think we have about 6 million now, so can you imagine how much we are allowing them to repatriate the money outside of Malaysia? Thank you.
Thank you, Dato'. So maybe looks like all the questions are directed to Encik Rizal. Maybe we'll start off with lowering the threshold for foreign buyers of properties. The first question.
Thank you for the question. So the reason for the reducing the threshold from 1 million to 600,000 is basically to reduce the property overhang. That's the main reason. Because of the value of the property overhang, based on the research, is about 8.3 billion. And these properties, actually, our locals cannot afford to buy them. So basically, this is to just reduce the property overhang. And but having said that, so we have, Ministry of Finance has just released the press release, just to reiterate that the threshold is just given to completed houses. It's not for the properties under construction. Just for it's not. It's to reduce the number of overhang properties, and of course the impact for the exchange rate is maybe a bonus for us if we have more capital money going to our country to improve the exchange rate. I think that's just the reason, just to reduce the overhang, because if you expect the locals to buy, not many people, especially young, family lah, young worker, because of the income. Yeah? Because, for example, BSN still having this youth housing scheme loan, even though government is buying half, about 500 ringgit subsidized for the monthly installment. Still, the offtake is very small. So of course, we need to address the other issue of improving our income. But for the current, the measures is just, to address the current issue, to reduce the property overhang.
Second question on the focus on environment missing in the budget, or I think there's one small, very small section, but I'll let Riza mention, and also her question on private higher education. How come the incentives are not extended to private education, higher education industry in the private sector?
Okay. For the environment, in my presentation, there's like Prof. Yes mentioned. There's one section on strengthening economic diversity. Slide number 21. Basically, suddenly I forgot which slide. Okay. Maybe I reserve that question. Maybe my colleague can help me. The environment. Let me address the private education. Of course, we cannot mention everything in the budget speech, and of course the research grant. Actually, the public universities, of course, part of the grants given by the federal government will be given to public universities. But of course, academia in the public university or research in the public universities, they are also engaging in the private sector. Some universities are having subsidiaries, and when they are doing the research, of course, they need to collaborate with the private sector. So they will also benefit the private, the private universities as well. Okay. And then the incentive for private private education provider. So because of there's no mentioning about PTPTN in the budget, but still PTPTN still continue, and with the new administration, even they are relaxing the condition of payback. So indirectly, this also will benefit the private education system by government still subsidizing the interest rate of PTPTN. So more students can enroll in either in the public universities as well as in the private universities. But of course, the government is well aware that because that's why we are giving emphasis on R&D, and I don't think the R&D education that we are providing is just to target the government agencies. There will be a spillover effect also as well to the private institutions.
I think the last one is from a few questions related to foreign workers from Dato.
On the
not be fair to for him who have to answer the question.
Foreign labour, I'm not sure whether this is your view or question more. I assume that you are addressing for example, to address foreign labour using fiscal tools, because we are from Ministry of Finance. We have done some measures on addressing the foreign labour. For example, we have increased the levy last time. That's one of the part that how we can use fiscal tools. But if you are looking at measures to control the influx of foreign labour, it's not actually under Ministry of Finance. It is our immigration policy. It must be under the Ministry of Home Affairs. For me personally, the best way is to have a stricter foreign policy, foreign labour policy. Of course, we in the MOF we can use fiscal tools. We can use even in my presentation we have given to encourage local companies to hire local people. One of the main highlight is the Job Malaysia. So we are giving incentive. For example, 500 plus 300 is about 800 more. We are reducing the cost of hiring local. But the company has also have to play their roles. Companies, they are profit maximizing unit, so they want to maximize the profit. As long as they can have cheap labor, they will do that. So the most effective way is to stop the foreign labor, but it will have a repercussion on the construction sector. How many stakeholders are relying or depending? Even our economy is still depending on the construction sector. We need to look things at a more holistic way. We cannot just focus on specific portion or a specific issue. That's just my immediate response to that.
Yeah, I think your colleague may have a response to the environment question.
Okay, Assalamualaikum and a very good evening. My name is Imri. I'm from the Fiscal and Economics Division, particularly looking to debt and risk of the fiscal policy of the government. So just to give some flavor to what has been discussed today, I think the first one in terms of environment, I think if we look into the past budget speech, I think this year for the budget 2023 is among where the focus is more on the green or environment, where we have extended the incentive for the GITA and GTA for these solar panels, and also we have also extended the incentive for green energy production. I think there are a lot of incentive for environment for this particular budget. But of course, given the backdrop of our economy projection next year, so that is why the focus of the budget this year is to sustain our growth. I think that's where the focus of the budget, because we can mention about many aspects in the budget, but I think the more important one is how to have a more resilient domestic economy, and also how we can create more jobs for our locals. So just to take it on from Cik Rizal, I think the problem of foreign workers, this is a structural problems. It cannot be resolved within 1 or 2 budgets. I think even for the past few years, the government has been looking into this very seriously. We try to impose a higher levy for the foreign workers, but of course, this is not a zero-sum game, where the implication will be on the competitiveness of our businesses. So there are a lot of factors that has to be considered before we can have very constructive measures to address these issues. And I would like to add more on this about the fiscal and debt position of the government. I think thank you very much for Encik Zaidi for articulating all of this government policy with regard to our fiscal position. I think what is the more important thing is that how we can achieve a balance for our fiscal in terms of sustaining growth, and how we can utilize our resource effectively. This is the more important part, because we have been experiencing deficit for the past 20 years, and people still are expecting goodies in every budget. So and government in terms of investment to further inject into the economy, we are not only using our normal fiscal tool, which is our development expenditure, but we have also extended the fiscal assistance in the form of government guarantees, and we have also via our GLCs. So there are a lot of fiscal instruments that is being utilized by the government to support the growth and to create the job for the economy. And of course, the resources are not infinite. There must be a certain kind of discipline, because we don't want to spend everything now, and we shift the burden of the debt for our future generation. So that is where how we should have a limit, have a balance on how we can spend in the economy. That's why I think like our Prof mentioned just now, I think if we were to want to pare down the debt immediately, so actually we are limiting our space to invest now. We should invest to create a new capacity, to create a new economy, rather than we just use all of this cash to pay down that. So there must be balance. So thank you.
Thank you. I think we have exceeded our time, but I think we will open for last few from our panelists first, and then one from Dr. Dora, the organizer. So please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to come in support of our MOF colleagues here, on the environment, if you go back to the budget speech, where I sat through from 4 p.m. till almost 7, all right? So I remember this. In the budget speech, there was a mention about Sungai Kim Kim. I'm sure you heard that, right? And yes, in Pasir Gudang, Sungai Kim Kim pollution and the pollution alike in the country. So for that, YB Lim Guan Eng has allocated, I can't remember what's the amount, a few million to YB Yobiin, who's in charge of environment, who's the environment minister, to deal with such problems in the future. So I thought I'd just mention that.
Okay. Any other panelists who would like to share their last perspectives on the response as well as the reactions and anything? If not, Dr. Jara, you'd like to say a few words?
If I can just something, at the end of the day, budget is really what you have in the pocket and how you distribute it. You got 14 kids, 14 states, and not everyone is going to be happy. However you divide the money, right? You got only that sum of money in your pocket. But what's important to me is it gets to its intended purpose, and the results needs to be measured. How effective the money goes down and how effective it is utilized to generate whatever the intended thing is. I mean, that's the area which I feel that the administration side of any budget exercise is must never be overlooked, because ultimately at the end of the day, experience down on the ground is what matters. Whether you can say the numbers, but the people on the ground does not feel it, it comes to nothing. Thank you.
Those are good wise words of advice. Perhaps we will end with Dr. Zora.
Thank you, Prof. But before that, just a quick food for thought to Encik Rizal. With regards to the housing prices and also, the foreigners given the leeway from 1 million to 600,000 value of property. Does that mean that we are looking at it from I'm looking at it from two perspectives here. You are allowing the foreigners to buy property which before they can only purchase that are more than a million and above. Now they can purchase things that are 600,000 and above, right? Okay, now that's because there are a lot of houses that is within that range that are not able to sell. So does that mean that the government is helping the housing sector in this matter so that they can sell their, the units that are not sold at whatever price it is, all right? And how is that supposed to help with the growth of the economy if you will have to compromise on your decision with regards to the position of foreigners in this country in purchasing properties or properties in Malaysia? Are you compromising your decision, your earlier decision when you raise it to 1 million? Now you are reducing it to 600,000. All right, and also when we look at it, of course, we can look at it from another perspective. That is from the housing construction sector. It is good for them if they can sell the units. It would be good because then they would be able to pay taxes to the country. So it would be a very good measure for the country to be getting more revenue from the construction of property sector. But is it at the expense of having to change your policy with regards to foreign-owned properties in Malaysia? Okay, I don't need you to answer that. No, don't need to answer. Just something to consider. Okay, yeah, and that's all, Prof. Ye. Back to you. Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you for this. What you call comments. Without the need to, you would like to respond, Encik Rizal?
It's mentioned about the properties is just for high-rise building, for condominiums and apartments. So condominiums and high-rise building apartments with that price only available in cities, and basically most of our local still doesn't like to live in that kind of property, and they're still looking for landed houses and outskirts the cities. So
yeah, I think that brings the session to an end. Let me thank all the panelists for their very insightful sharing, and then thank you for your participation. Thank you.
Ladies